Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Historic Ag Reserve Properties presentation with Kenny Sholes. And for those that don't know, Kenny's a longtime Poolesville resident who enjoys exploring Ag Reserve history and serves as a board member for the Montgomery Countryside Alliance. Please remain muted during the presentation, and we will have an opportunity to ask questions at the end. And you can always feel free to post your questions in the chat, and Kenny can either read them or we can read them for you. So whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kelly. Appreciate it. Great to be with you all again. Let's see here. Hopefully you can see my slides. Yeah, so it's good to be with you guys. It's been, I think we skipped last month, so maybe it was April when I was last here, but there's been so much going on these last couple of months. And so this, last week when I was starting to think about what do I want to talk about tonight, I was thinking like it might just be useful to really do a little bit of a year in review so far, since we're almost halfway through the year, which is just crazy to me because time is flying by. But there's been a lot of really great things related to local history over these last 5 or 6 months that some of which I've been involved with, others that are just kind of taking place and are really fun to watch. And so I just thought maybe I'd walk through some of those things that I'm taking note of. And then if there are questions, happy to talk through any of them. But if there are other things that you're aware of that you want to talk about, we can do that too. This picture here on the screen has absolutely nothing to do with history. I just like it. It's my little one chasing deer the other night, but I use it to say that the skies right now are unbelievable. So at like 7:30, if you're looking to do something outside of your house, just get in your car and go find a rural road somewhere and just throw your phone up and you cannot take a bad picture. Like, I am by no means a photographer, but the light right now at this time of year around 7:30, 8 o'clock it's impossible to fail. So get out there and check out some of our rustic roads and you will be rewarded with some pretty amazing sunsets. So the first thing I wanted to highlight, and this took place, I guess back in February, March timeframe, but the Martinsburg Cemetery. So the Martinsburg community is a historically Black community that was settled right after the Civil War concluded, and the community set up a church, kind of. If you all know where Kaleva is, it's really kind of back up in there, up in the woods, kind of towards the top of this little rise. They built a church and they built a cemetery around this church in the late 1800s. And they ended up actually moving the church down all the way down onto Whites Ferry Road. So if you're in kind of the Martinsburg area, there's kind of the church, and there's the small schoolhouse, and then behind that there's like the I think the Loving Charity Hall that's been restored recently. That church, which is currently undergoing some restoration efforts itself, is not the original one on that site, but the original one was moved from this spot up here by Kaleva with logs all the way down to the spot right along Whites Ferry Road, which is kind of interesting. So that took place in the late 1800s. But the cemetery obviously remains. And so we have this really fascinating historic African-American cemetery deep in the woods back there, off of Martinsburg Road. And there were sections that were kind of taken care of and well, kind of, it was very clear where the stone markers were, but most of the cemetery was completely overgrown. And this is a site that I don't know if Glenn's on here, but Glenn and I have been out to a couple of times over the last few years and talked about wanting to get a group of people out here to clean it up and really see how many stones are here, and then maybe start some work to figure out who's actually buried here, right? Because we don't really have great records, and I think that's sad. I think we should know who's buried out here. These were all individuals that lived interesting lives. Many of them probably started their lives in slavery before the Civil War ended. And so it's, it's important to me that we recognize them. So in February, March, working with Pastor Chuck Copeland, who did an awesome job kind of organizing a group, we brought a bunch of volunteers, as you can see in the picture out there. And I mean, this cemetery is really, really big and really, really overgrown. I was amazed with the amount of work that got done in this first session in clearing out this site. And then the Markov family, who runs Kaleva, they had some big like bulldozers and big heavy equipment. They brought that up here as well. And so together between this session and then I think we did another one about a month later, we were able to make a ton of progress. I mean, the site looks completely transformed now, very much kind of cleared off, at least all of the underbrush. And what was really exciting about that was uncovering a whole bunch of tombstones that had just kind of been overgrown or just lost over the decades. This picture Nathan Naylor's stone, he's thought to be one of the individuals that helped settle the Martinsburg community. He died in 1880, and I think that stone says he was born on 1812. So he certainly began his life enslaved, and then went on to kind of play a prominent role in the community, which is really interesting. Yeah, Jack asked if Bernie Mim, who's in town and kind of local landscape architect, he was there with us helping and was planning to go back to spray down some vegetation killer. I don't know exactly, Jack, if he's done that yet. I need to talk to him to figure out kind of what the next steps are. The winter is always a really, really good time to do this work because everything's kind of dead and it's easier to clear out. So probably need to get another group to go up there now that it's middle of summer and see kind of how we've fared since that cleanup, since everything's been growing. But really just exciting work and will be a work in progress for sure. But I think once we can get this thing completely cleaned up, then we can bring in specialists like Glenn to begin marking this site and really mapping it out. One, to make sure that it's on the map, to keep developers far away from it. But two, just to pay recognition to whoever is buried there. Because again, we don't have those records. So that'll be a fun project, I think, moving forward that the community can collectively work on. So I've talked about it many times, but I am just very interested in Annington, which is the home down by White's Ferry, right off of White's Ferry Road. It was built in 1813 by the Trundle family, and it went up for sale in December. And when it sold in the last couple of months, I figured out who bought it and immediately reached out to them. I was like, I'm going to be best friends with these people and let's see what happens here. And lucky for us as a community, the new property owners are A, just absolutely wonderful people, but B, very much interested in restoring the home to kind of its initial character. They want to make some tweaks exterior wise to make it a little bit more livable, which is completely understandable. They've got to live there. But I'm really excited to have homeowners who really recognize kind of the gem that they have, and also recognize, they said to me something when I first met, which is always a positive sign, that they also recognize that with a house like this, you are, even though you own it, you are essentially just a caretaker until you sell it to somebody else, right? It's your kind of responsibility. You have the ball in your hands now to take care of it and to keep it in good shape to pass it on to the next generation. And I always think that's a really just wonderful viewpoint when historic homeowners have that view that this is something that they're going to live in, but that ultimately this will pass on, and hopefully it's around for another 200 years with us. So I've had the chance now to go in here, and it is really interesting on the inside. I will show you the pictures in a second. What I would tell you before I show you those is it's worth remembering that or if you didn't know this, it's worth noting the prior owners of this property had a vision to turn it into a bed and breakfast. So to make it a bed and breakfast, essentially what they had to do was largely gut the interior and try to put bathrooms in every major like room or bedroom, right? Because if it's a bed and breakfast and you've got people staying in these rooms, they each need their own bathroom. And so as a result, like the new homeowners were kind of saying to me, which is funny but also annoying, is like, you've got like 5 or 6 bedrooms and then there's like 8 or 9 bathrooms in the house at this point, and we don't need that many bathrooms, right? So there's going to be some work. So it's really been on the interior, it's largely been brought down to the studs in some places, but you can really just see kind of the bones of the place that are absolutely amazing. I mean, it's a really, really impressive, large federal school home. So you can see kind of the main staircase. This is from the second floor on the right. So this is rising up into the attic or the third floor here. And then on the left here, and I'm using my little one to demonstrate just the the size. These are stairs that go up into the attic from the second floor. And you can see just from her standing there, they are maybe a foot wide at most. I mean, they are like, I'm not a big person, and I had to squeeze to get up this staircase. And what it was they were known as, like, I think called traveler staircases, and they were for people who were kind of out on the road who needed to spend the night in this place and stop by. They would use this staircase up into the attic to sleep for the night. It was also, I believe, where probably the servants' quarters were, and potentially even enslaved workers worked or lived up in the attic and then came down these stairs. But just like a really fascinating feature to this home. I've never seen anything like it before, but just kind of very unique. Down on the main floor, so on the right, what you're looking at is kind of from the back of the house, looking through kind of the main foyer to the front door. So as you can see, it requires some work. It's certainly kind of been stripped down, but luckily a lot of the main features like the doors, the paneling on the staircase here, some of the decorative detail on each of the stairs has remained intact. So a lot of those kind of core features are still there. Now these new homeowners are going to have to come in here and spend some time and probably a whole lot of money to kind of get it back into that original state. On the left is I think what was kind of like it was almost like a study, kind of off the main, on the first floor, kind of off the main dining room. So just kind of a really fascinating home. And then this picture I think is interesting because this is from the second floor bedroom. And one of the things that we know about Annington is that during the Battle of Ball's Bluff, which took place, right essentially on the Potomac, just a little bit down from White's Ferry. One of the things we know, though, is that during that battle, Union commanders actually monitored progress of the battle from the upper floors of Annington. And it's highly, highly likely that this is the room they would have done it from. So these two windows to me are just fascinating because back during the Civil War, it's very likely that we had Union officers standing here leaning against this wall, watching the progress of this battle take place out these windows. And so I just think it's interesting to think about what were those conversations like, because the battle did not go well at all for the Union troops. So it likely happened, that observation likely happened from this room. Okay, moving on. So there was a panel, the Montgomery County Lynching Memorial Project it has been working for a while now, to get essentially a historic marker up here in town to commemorate the lynching that took place in town back in the 1890s, I believe. Um, so they've essentially been trying to generate local support for this memorial. They've received support, my understanding is, from the town council, and it sounds like they're going to place a marker at. I think it sounds like it's going to take a while, but at the remembrance, like the community garden that's right there on Elgin Road, kind of next to, I don't know if it's a, I don't know what denomination of church it is there, but that old brick church building, kind of over where that preschool building is, right there, right where that community garden is located. That's likely where they're going to put the marker, since that is very close to what we believe to be the lynching spot. So they had this panel back on the 19th of May, and it was really just to talk about why, why, getting a sense of why we thought it was important to have this marker. You can see there's a really attractive looking young man there in the middle, who was invited to speak. I don't like, I feel I'm glad that we're recording this history, and I'm glad that we're having these conversations. I think some of the things that this group wants to do with the marker, I'm not necessarily, like, I don't know, are super effective. Like, I have mixed feelings about the process. I'm glad we're telling this story. But it was fun to kind of participate in this panel and just talk a little bit about the importance of making sure that all sides of the history of this place are told, and kind of recognizing that even though I very much love this space, and I think everybody on this panel does, and I'm sure all of you do as well, that it's important that we recognize kind of how far we've come, and also how much work we still have to do. And so that was really kind of the conversation. On the next day, on the 20th, it was a busy weekend for me. We had the historic home tour, where we had 150 people bought tickets, which was awesome. All of that money went straight to Historic Medley District, and we opened up 6 properties for participants to explore. The very first time I did these home tours, I actually had a bus from Kaleva, and it bussed everybody around, and that was great. I really enjoyed it. The challenge with it was that it was a long day, and everybody that was there basically had to be there from start to finish. It was you couldn't really get off the bus. And so the last 2 times that we've done this, it's a little bit more of an open model. So what we did here, for those of you who weren't there with us, was essentially I gave a little bit of a historic overview at the beginning out at the John Poole House, which is what you're looking at here, and then essentially cut everybody loose and let them go out to the homes that were on the list that they received the addresses to. And it seemed like it worked really well, even with the 150 people spread over 6 homes. Actually, when I talked to the homeowners after the event, it didn't feel like anybody was getting rushed at one time. There was kind of a steady flow of people in and out. And it's nice too, I think, as for the participants, just because you can kind of come and go as you please. You need to stop and get lunch, or you want to end your day early or whatever. You kind of have that freedom to do it because you're in your own car. But I thought ultimately it was a really successful event. I saw that Jim Poole was on here. Special thanks to him. He helped man he did man and led the effort out at the Trundle Barn, which is a really cool historic barn out there on Martinsburg Road. And everybody was really excited to kind of be able to see that up close. It's another one of those places where it's right on the road, so you've passed it for years but never actually really gotten to go inside of it. And so what we were able to do with Jim's help was kind of open it up. And then Jim dressed up like a 19th century farmer and help people kind of better understand what was taking place there. So I had a lot of really, really positive comments about that. So thank you again, Jim, for volunteering to do that for me. Let's see. Yeah, so this is just a couple of pictures from out there. On the far left, this was Mount Ephraim out right at the base of Sugarloaf. And kind of the home itself is kind of a big brick federal style home. This there was like a restored historic log cabin that was actually moved from northern Maryland down onto the property before the current owners bought it. So they've got this kind of bonus little historic one-room cabin on their property. That's kind of cool. In the middle, this is the cemetery out at Darnall Farm. So I know this was a real crowd favorite. The Darnall Farm is just kind of such an interesting, very different setting, and I'll show you a better picture of this in a minute. But it's kind of a grouping of historic stone buildings that made up, kind of where the Darnall family lived, and then eventually were buried. And then on the right is the Solomon Simpson plantation. So this is kind of the stone portion from the late 1700s of the home, and you can see it's been really, really nicely restored. You can't really tell from here, but to the left there is a really modern kitchen that was built in the last 5 or 6 years. And I always tell people this, I think, and for those of you on the tour, maybe you would agree that the way that these homeowners have incorporated brand new, very modern architecture with very old is really, really well done, in a way that I think it's pretty hard to achieve. And they definitely knocked it out of the park. This is Darnall Place. You can see just kind of a really fascinating spot. So these structures all from the late 1700s or early 1800s, but very it's described in the history records as kind of almost like a Dutch style, like grouping of structures. So unlike some of the other places, which are just these big grand homes, this is kind of multiple different quarters. I took this picture. Standing behind me or sitting behind me is actually a larger stone barn that's also historic in there. And then way back behind me from where I'm taking this picture would be the family cemetery, which you saw the picture of before. And then I think just because I got a lot of comments about it, it seemed like the real crowd pleaser this year. The high point was getting to see Winterbourne. So Winterbourne, built in the 1880s. It's out in Boyd's. It's kind of, if you know where like that big lake out there is, which is man-made actually. This sits right on that lake. And that picture on the left, it's very hard to believe, but I took that picture on the left about 2 years ago. And I took the picture on the right on May 20th. So the current owners who have bought it within the last year have done a ton of work. It is technically a restoration, although I will tell you that they had to almost knock that old home on the left completely down, and then rebuild it back up. And what I just love about it is they are following kind of the floor plan to a T, as you can see, as they rebuild, to keep it in line with what it looked like when it was built by the Totten family back in the 1800s. So this is going to be a really, I think a really special, interesting place. This is another place where we are very lucky in that we have awesome homeowners here who they were excited to be part of the tour. And then I think once they saw people coming in and just admiring all the work that they've been doing, because this home is way off the beaten path. You cannot see this from the road. Once they saw people get so excited to see it, I think it really kind of energized them. And they sent me a note just saying that it really kind of reminded them of like how special what they're doing is, and really kind of re-energized them, which I just love. So I think this is another one of those homes where as we move forward, we'll continue to have access to be able to kind of include it on tours to see how it progresses. Because I think, the owner thinks that they're about halfway done with kind of the restoration work. So maybe another, 2 years or so. So we'll be checking in on these guys pretty frequently to see where they're at. Just a couple of weeks ago, the historic Medley District hosted Cocktails in the Garden event. So the idea here was the John Poole House is really kind of an interesting old structure, and it's got an interesting yard. And if you've been back there, or if you've spent time at locals outside, you've probably noticed there's like a small, pretty well manicured garden in the backyard, which was really put in there by design, and is something that HMD is working to kind of maintain and potentially even expand at some point. And so what the group did was essentially just have a little bit of a gathering in the backyard. Really nice night. It's kind of the right time of year to do this. Made a bunch of drinks, and then Maureen O'Connell, who runs HMD, kind of gave a little bit of a talk on just kind of the history of the site and the garden there, and some of the things to look for. And so it was a really nice event, and really exciting, because I think as a board member with HMD, we're really trying to do more events that kind of bring different groups of people to these sites. I think a lot of times there's a kind of a core set of people that are interested in history around town, which is wonderful and awesome. And I think the question is always like, how do we continue to expand that? Turns out providing alcohol is one good way to do that. And so we'll continue to exercise that option moving forward. I probably saw some of you at the event last weekend, the Taste of Riverworks. Really exciting event out at the old Methodist Church building right there off of West Willard. I think the Riverworks Art Center that Dave is, from locals, is working to kind of establish and develop is going to be a really exceptional, amazing place. It's going to be a very expensive project for him. I'm glad I'm not paying for it, but I'm happy to support the effort for sure, just because I strongly believe in it. But I actually had never been inside of the Methodist Church, kind of one of the few historic buildings in town I hadn't seen the interior of. And so it was really exciting to get to do that. I'm sure a lot of you spent time in there when it was the old thrift store. I never actually went in there. But what he's been doing is going in and trying to kind of restore it a little bit into kind of what it initially looked like. So my understanding is, there was essentially 2 floors there, but really when it was initially built in 1826, there was kind of like you see maybe in St. Peter's, for example, or out at St. Mary's, there's kind of like an upper deck. And this was actually, when it was built, this was actually for enslaved persons. So this was kind of what was referred to as the slave gallery. And they would sit up here to attend services. So they were not sitting down with white families. So Dave has kind of worked to try to restore kind of that or bring that upper deck back. So what I think is fascinating, and I'm sure many of you heard this story before, but in the late 1800s, one of the ministers of this Methodist church passed away. And I have no idea how this transpired, but there was a decision made, or maybe it was his last desire. They buried him right underneath the pulpit, right underneath the floor there. And so that is his tombstone that's just sitting there. It's placed against the wall because it marks where he rests. And so it's really funny because Dave is obviously, as he's purchased this site, has been not forced, but he wants to, and it's also kind of required to do a lot of work in the backyard of the site to figure out, we knew that there was a graveyard there. And so he had to kind of do some work with some ground penetrating radar to figure out, is there anybody still buried there? The story is they've been moved. And what the radar, is telling us is that they were all the bodies and remains were moved from that site. It's still very clearly, when you look at the radar, kind of, you can see pretty clearly where the resting places were, but the bodies have been moved, likely to Monocacy in most cases. But I said to him, like, well, do you think the minister is there? And he kind of looked at me and he's like, Yeah, we confirmed he's down there. So they pulled up the floor and looked, and I guess it's pretty clear that there's like a depression, which is a pretty solid sign. And so um, they're just going to work around it. They're not interfering with it, but it's just kind of a very interesting tale, and kind of a very interesting piece of the history to this place that I haven't seen at any other small rural church that I've been to before. So I didn't. Somebody asked me this question, and I didn't answer it earlier because I was going to talk about it here. So, the Evans home. So this is the old home on Elgin Road. It's my favorite, and I've talked to you all about it many times before. It's largely because it's a home that I spent a lot of time growing up in. The Evans family is like a second family to me. But they put it up for sale back at, I guess, right around the end of May. It is under contract. I would love to tell you right now that it's under contract because I bought it, but I was juggling. I really want to live in this house, and I also want to stay married, and so I had to decide which was more important. And so I've decided to stay married for the time being, at least. And so it is somebody else that has purchased this home, sadly. But I'm the sad face is just the Evans family leaving. I'm really excited for whoever moves in, and I will certainly work to make sure that I can still get some access to the interior of the home. But for those of you who hadn't been on the inside, what's kind of nice is whenever a house goes for sale, especially an old house, I spend a lot of time immediately going online to look at all the interior pictures, because A, it's interesting, and B, normally it's a professional photographer. But yeah, Denise said it seemed like a reasonable price. Yeah, it was. It was a very reasonable price. I think it was priced around 650, 620 something. It was by no means kind of crazy price. I know just because I know them, I know they got well over what they asked for, which is great. But yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful old home. It's a fairly like standard layout for homes of this age. This was built in 1885. So definitely one of the older homes in town. But what's interesting is a lot of the features in this home, especially the way that we look at like the balustrades on the stairs, and then even the mantle work there on the upper left picture. A lot of that work I've seen repeated in other old homes across the ag reserve. And so I think whether it was when the house was initially built or just at a later date, whoever was coming through and kind of doing this work was moving from house to house and kind of putting their touch on these places. But yeah, just a really, really special place that I'm sad to see the Evans leave, but excited for whoever gets to kind of live here next. I mentioned earlier, I posted this on Facebook the other day, but the like I said, the skies are amazing right now. I strongly recommend getting out there in your car and just kind of exploring the ag reserve right now at this time of year. If you've never been, and I'm showing this because if you've never done this before, I can't more highly recommend it. Go down to White's Ferry, and when you hit White's Ferry, you're likely going to get to it from White's Ferry Road if you're leaving Poolsville. The road continues and it turns into a gravel road. It's kind of this old portion of River Road. If you've never driven that route before, I strongly recommend it because it is, if you want to get a good sense of the ag reserve kind of in its truest form, I think that section of road really does it. It's really open, it's really expansive, super undeveloped. A couple of old houses kind of off in the distance that you can see, but just a really, really beautiful space. And I can't recommend enough getting out there and just checking it out yourself. From my role with Monocacy Cemetery Board, which I want to be very, very clear. I need to be far more active on that board. I'm not, but this work is by no means tied to me. The board is doing amazing things right now and has recently generated a ton of donations from people in the community, which has just been awesome. But the board is really trying to be very transparent about, there's a lot of things that we want to do with historic Monocacy Cemetery to make it even to secure it further so it's around, and to just make it even more appealing for visitors. So one of the things that you might have noticed if you've driven like out towards Dickerson recently is, on, I guess it's 28 there coming out of Bellsville. Previously, the cemetery, a lot of people didn't even know there was a cemetery there because it was kind of these hedgerows all the way down the road. So we've recently done work to get rid of those and replaced it with this really nice stone wall. And there's plans to kind of continue that work just to kind of beautify that area. So I just wanted to kind of highlight the really great work that's going on out there, and just kind of the game plan moving forward. If you're ever looking for a place that, if you've got too much money and you want to give some of it away, Monocacy Cemetery is a really great place to do it. It's a small organization that keeps that place maintained, but a little bit of money goes a long way, and it really is a special place. If you've never been out to the Monocacy Cemetery before, I really recommend you just drive over there on your own and check it out. I think people are always shocked at how much bigger it is than they expect, and also just how much local history and local names you will see in that space. Okay, so this has definitely not happened, but I'm putting it out there just for public and personal accountability. So one of the things that I've been doing is, my good buddy Martin Radigan, who's a professional photographer, we've been talking and he's been shooting a lot of pictures for some kind of potential publication focused on old homes in the Ag Reserve. I have visions of a book that's similar to, if you've seen Bread and Beauty, which was the cookbook of the Ag Reserve. I think it's beautifully done. I'm not all that interested in doing anything unless it results in something that's just like absolutely beautiful that people want on their tables and is going to last, through time. But we are in kind of the early stages of exploring some options here and thinking about what might make sense, what might actually, not trying to make money, but also not trying to lose a lot of money making a book. So figuring out like what would make sense there. So I just put this out there to say, check in with me over the months and kind of hold me accountable, because I've said like this is something I want to do. But also, if any of you have thoughts about what you would like to see in some kind of like coffee table book focused on old homes in the Ag Reserve, or you have experience in this space, I am absolutely all ears, because it's not something I have much experience with. Please reach out, and I'd love to buy you coffee at locals or whatever and have further discussions about it. So just putting that out there. And I think that's it. Yeah, so any questions or comments or anything I can spend more time on?
Well, it sounds like you've been busy.
It's funny, I didn't feel like there was too much going on. Like, I've been very busy in other things, but when we sit down and really look at all the things that have been going on this year, there's been a lot of really great work that's going on. So it's exciting.
Yeah, how did everyone like the tour of the house? I missed it. The historic tour.
It seemed like, I mean, I got nothing but positive reviews. So I think everybody liked it. I think we're really lucky here that we've hit this place where, for the most part, we've got a group of historic homeowners that are really excited and willing to show off their properties. And so that makes it fun because they're really invested in it and they really like doing it. And it's also exciting because, like, honestly, so we sold 150 tickets at, I think, $30 each. So it was like $4,500 to HMD. So $4,500 in the grand scheme of things is not that much money. To a small nonprofit like Historic Medley, that is a really, really large sum of money. And these small like HMD, for example, just because again I'm on the board, and so I know, like, we maintain the John Poole House, the Old Town Hall, and the Seneca Schoolhouse. And even though those structures are largely just sitting there, you would be amazed at how expensive they are just to kind of keep standing. And so that money goes a long way. And so it's exciting to be able to turn kind of some of this interest in old properties that I think we have across the community into some real kind of good funding to help ensure that they stick around. So that's been cool to be able to see and play a role in.
Does anyone have any
Kenny,
questions?
plug it. Oh, this is Jack. I was just going to say, Kenny, I know you know about it, but there's a really cool Facebook page called Poolsville Now and Then that I know Jim Pool's a regular contributor to it. I know I love his posts, but recently I just found, and I don't know if it's a brand new site or not, there's a Bellsville Now and Then. I think Glenn might be one of the administrators.
Well, yeah, Glenn just started that like last week.
Yeah, which is also a pretty cool site for sharing the history. They're both pretty neat.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, Glenn created that, and that is really cool. I've already seen like 2 or 3 really interesting pictures that people put on there from like pumping gas at what was Stobbs out there at Bellsville, like in the 40s, it's kind of an interesting picture. So yeah, I'm excited to see kind of who comes out of the woodwork to post pictures on there and have, their memories kind of portrayed on that site. That is fun because the Pools on them page is great too, just for, especially like you said, when Jim will post some things sometimes where I'm like, wow, that is a crazy picture to look like. Some of the fairs at the old high school in the 1940s are really fascinating to me to see. So I love that kind of stuff.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments or anything? Well, it looks like we're going to wrap up then. So I want to thank you for being here again this month, Kenny. It's always a great presentation. We love having you here. And I want to thank everyone for joining us to watch. And please consider joining us at some other events. We just had John Waltz announce a pop-up walk for Monday at 10 a.m. It's going to be a tour of Riley's Lock House, and then he'll follow it up with a walk. And then on the 22nd, we have Fred Smoke, who's going to be talking about his cycling trek across the US at 7, which is also a Zoom. And then, of course, we have our monthly movie night on the 23rd at 7, and we're going to watch Belfast. So you can register at poolsvilleseniors.com and always email us if you have questions. And thank you all for joining.
Thanks. Great talk.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.